Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey into the frozen heart and forgotten corners of Alberta. Through isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing and terrifying small-town horror stories ever recorded. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real, documented encounters from ordinary people who never expected to face true evil. From abandoned prairie farmhouses to silent highways at night. From basements hiding dark secrets to disappearances that defy explanation. Tonight, you will hear horrors that refuse to be forgotten. And did you know that 91.2% of you guys watching aren't subscribed yet? So, make sure to subscribe and like the video. It helps the channel grow and keeps the darkness alive. Now, let us step into the shadows of Alberta, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and this happened when I was 26 years old, living in a town most maps don't bother to label anymore. The place was called Coldwater, Alberta, a farming settlement with 1 gas station, 1 diner, and far too many abandoned houses for a population barely pushing 400. I moved there chasing quiet. After my divorce, silence felt safer than people. I took a night job maintaining electrical lines for the county. Long stretches of road, frozen fields, and the hum of power poles to keep me company. The locals warned me early on, "Don't drive the back roads after dark," the diner owner said, sliding me coffee I hadn't ordered, especially when the lights start acting strange. I laughed it off. Power flickers happen everywhere. But Coldwater had a pattern. Every few weeks, just after midnight, one house at the edge of town would go completely dark. Not a blown fuse, not a storm. And by morning, the family inside would be gone. No signs of struggle, no notes. Just cold rooms, and 1 light bulb shattered on the floor. At first, I convinced myself the stories were exaggerated. Small towns survive on rumors the way cities survive on noise. But after my 3rd week in Coldwater, I started noticing the lights myself. It always began the same way. I'd be driving home after a late maintenance call, the clock on my dash reading 12:17 a.m., when a house on the outskirts would flicker once, twice, and then go completely dark. Not just the porch light. Everything. As if the house had been unplugged from reality. The strangest part wasn't the darkness. It was the silence that followed. No dogs barking, no generators kicking in. Even the wind seemed to pause, like the town was holding its breath. I'd slow my truck every time, my fingers tightening on the steering wheel, fighting the urge to stop and check. One night, I finally asked Marcus, the county sheriff. His jaw clenched when I mentioned the outages. "We don't talk about that," he said quietly. "Last man who went checking alone didn't come back, right?" That was the moment I realized something was very wrong with Coldwater. A few nights later, I got a call just before midnight. A transformer had tripped near the old Miller farm, a place everyone avoided even in daylight. The Millers had vanished years ago, leaving the house standing like a rotten tooth at the edge of town. As I drove out, the radio kept cutting to static. Not the normal kind. This sounded layered, almost rhythmic, like breathing hidden beneath the noise. I told myself it was interference from the lines. When I reached the farm road, my headlights caught something that made my stomach tighten. The house was dark, except for 1 light glowing in an upstairs window. A soft yellow bulb. Steady, patient. That wasn't possible. There was no active power line feeding that place. I parked anyway. The cold felt heavier there, pressing against my ears. As I stepped out, the light flickered once, like it had noticed me. Then I heard it. Footsteps inside the house. Slow, deliberate, moving from room to room. Someone, or something, was awake in a house that should have been dead. I didn't want to go inside. Every instinct I had screamed to leave, to get back in my truck and never return. But the county job drilled one rule into me: confirm the fault source before reporting it. I circled the house instead. The closer I got, the stronger the smell became. Burnt dust mixed with something metallic, like old blood on cold iron. The upstairs light cast long, crooked shadows through broken boards, stretching across the yard like reaching fingers. That's when I noticed the windows. From the outside, they were black. No glow, no reflection. The light only existed if you looked straight at the house. I froze. Behind me, the light on my truck clicked off. The engine died. In the silence that followed, the upstairs bulbs shattered with a sharp pop, plunging the farmhouse into total darkness. Immediately, the footsteps stopped. Then, a new sound replaced them. Something heavy began moving down the stairs. Slow, unhurried, coming for the only light left, me. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just did it for me. The moment the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, the air around the farmhouse changed. Thicker, heavier, like I was breathing through wet cloth. I fumbled for my truck door, my hands numb, my keys slipping from my fingers and clattering into the dirt. That sound felt impossibly loud. Final. Behind me, something stepped onto the porch. The wood didn't creak. It groaned, as if the house itself was in pain. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I knew, deep in my chest, that whatever stood there wasn't shaped quite right. It moved like it was learning how weight worked, testing gravity one step at a time. My headlights flickered back on suddenly, blinding white cutting through the dark. In that brief reflection on the windshield, I saw a shape standing too close. Tall, thin, head tilted as if curious. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gas and tore down the road, leaving the farmhouse swallowed by darkness behind me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that reflection, how the shape's head leaned slightly, like it was studying me, like I was new. The next morning, Coldwater felt wrong, quieter than usual. I stopped at the diner, hoping normal conversation would ground me. Instead, I found the place half empty. That's when I heard the news. The Harris family, who lived 2 houses down from mine, were gone. All 4 of them. Their home had lost power sometime after midnight. No forced entry, no blood, no footprints in the snow, just one thing: a shattered light bulb in the living room, glass scattered beneath the socket. The diner owner looked at me carefully. "You were out late," she said. I didn't answer. Outside, as I walked to my truck, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My porch light, one I always left on, was dark. The bulb inside was cracked, and for the first time since moving to Coldwater, my house felt watched. That night, I sat in my living room with every lamp turned on. The house glowed like a beacon against the dark fields outside, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the light wasn't protecting me. It was inviting something in. Around 12:17 a.m., the lights flickered. Once, twice. I stood up so fast my chair toppled behind me. The air grew cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. From somewhere inside the walls came a faint clicking sound, like fingers tapping glass. Then I heard it. A soft hum. It wasn't mechanical. It had a rhythm, almost a tune. The same cadence I'd heard hidden in the radio static days earlier. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Turn off the lights." Before I could respond, the power cut out. Every bulb in the house shattered at once, exploding into darkness. In the silence that followed, I heard footsteps moving through my hallway. Slow, careful, and learning the shape of my home. Something had finally followed the light. I hid in the bathroom, the only room without a window, pressing my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The hum drifted closer, vibrating through the pipes, the walls, the floor beneath my feet. Then the door handle turned. Not forcefully, carefully, like it was afraid of breaking me. A voice whispered my name. Not quite right. Stretched and layered, like it had practiced using it. The doorknob rattled once, then stopped. Suddenly the power surged back on. Light flooded the house. The humming vanished. I waited until dawn before opening the door. Nothing was out of place, no footprints, no damage. Just one thing. In my living room, a single lamp was still on. Beneath it lay a shattered bulb I didn't recognize. Later that day, I quit my job and left Coldwater for good. The town still exists, but every few weeks, another house goes dark. And somewhere in Alberta, something is still learning how we live. By following the light. I told myself it was over once I crossed the provincial line. New town, new apartment, bright city lights that never slept. I avoided darkness like it could recognize me. For months, nothing happened. Then one night, while unpacking a box I'd ignored since moving, I found something that made my blood run cold. At the bottom, wrapped in an old work rag, was a light bulb. Cracked down the middle, glass clouded from the inside like breath had been trapped there. I didn't remember bringing it with me. When I touched it, my apartment lights flickered. Just once. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. You left the light on. That night, I dreamed of Coldwater, of houses blinking out one by one like stars dying. In the dream, the thing stood at the edge of town now, taller than before, watching highways instead of fields. I woke up sweating, my bedroom lamp glowing softly, and I knew then it didn't belong to the town. It belonged to whoever noticed the darkness first. I don't turn lights on anymore. People think it's a quirk or that I'm trying to save electricity. The truth is simpler and worse. Darkness doesn't attract it. Light does. I've learned the pattern now. It watches. It waits. When someone feels safest, when a room is warm and bright and human, it learns a little more about how we live, how we hide. Coldwater still loses people. So do other towns. Different provinces. Different names. Same reports. Same shattered bulbs. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the hum again. Faint, drifting through power lines like a whisper traveling on copper veins. When that happens, I sit very still and let the dark have me. Because I've seen what happens to the ones who leave the light on. And one day, when it has learned enough, it won't need the bulbs anymore. That's when every town will go dark at once, and there will be nothing left to follow us home. My name is Liam Hargreaves, and this happened when I was 32, during my first winter working road maintenance near Blackwood, Alberta. The town sat along a narrow river, split in half by an old concrete bridge everyone avoided after sunset. I didn't believe in curses or haunted places. I believed in poor lighting, bad insulation, and people letting fear rot their common sense. Blackwood tested that belief fast. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the bridge was at night. No birds, no insects. Even the river beneath it flowed without sound, like water moving through thick oil instead of ice melt. Locals warned me on day one. "Don't stop on the bridge," an older co-worker said. "And if you hear someone talking under it, no, you didn't." They told me people used to gather there decades ago, parties, meetings, things nobody wanted written down. Then people started disappearing, not violently, just gone. What bothered me wasn't the stories. It was how everyone lowered their voice when the bridge lights flickered on, like they didn't want something below to hear them. My shift ended at 1 a.m. Most nights, I took the long route home just to avoid the bridge. But one night, a snowstorm rolled in fast. Whiteout conditions, zero visibility, and the bridge became the only way back. As I slowed near the center, my headlights swept across the concrete railing. That's when I saw the writing. Names, dozens of them, scratched deep into the cement. Some fresh, some so old they'd almost been worn smooth. I recognized one. Daniel Frost. He'd been reported missing 3 years earlier. The case went cold. They said he'd fallen into the river drunk. I stopped breathing when I heard it. A whisper, rising from below the bridge. Not words at first, just breathy sounds, like someone trying to remember how language worked. Then it became clearer. Liam. My hands locked on the steering wheel. I hadn't told anyone in Blackwood my first name yet. The bridge lights flickered violently, and from beneath the concrete, something began whispering other names, one after another, each spoken with the intimacy of someone who had known them very, very well. I slammed the accelerator and didn't slow down until I was halfway home. The whisper followed me the entire way, not out loud, but inside my head, repeating names I recognized from old missing person flyers posted around town. The next morning, I went to the municipal office pretending I had paperwork issues. What I really wanted were records, incident reports, anything tied to the bridge. Most files were missing. The ones that remained followed the same pattern. Stalled vehicles, drivers claiming to hear voices, sudden panic, then resignation. Many reports ended mid-sentence, like whoever was writing them simply stopped. One name appeared again and again as the responding officer, Evelyn Moore. She'd retired years earlier and lived alone near the river. When I knocked on her door, she didn't ask why I was there. "You heard them, didn't you?" she said before I spoke. She poured me tea and stared at the steam. "They don't take you by force," she whispered. "They convince you that going down there was your idea." Evelyn told me the bridge wasn't always silent. Decades ago, before the river froze solid every winter, people used to meet underneath it. Not lovers or teenagers, desperate people. They came to confess things they couldn't live with. The water carried their words away. But one winter, the river froze early and thick. The voices had nowhere to go. They stayed trapped beneath the concrete, piling on top of each other, learning how to echo. "They listen," Evelyn said. "They learn your guilt first, then your name." I asked her why the lights flickered. She looked at me for a long time before answering. "Light makes them think someone's listening." That night, I drove past the bridge again. I didn't stop, but I slowed enough to hear the whispers rise eagerly from below, louder than before. They weren't calling me anymore. They were practicing my voice. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I returned to the bridge with a flashlight and a small recorder, hoping to capture proof of the whispers. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped onto the icy asphalt, every gust of wind sounding like voices just beyond comprehension. The lights flickered above me, casting long, crooked shadows across the concrete. I pointed the recorder toward the river and pressed play. At first, nothing. Just my breath and the soft groan of the metal trusses. Then, faintly, a voice. Soft, deliberate, almost sweet. "Liam." I froze. The sound came from below. I leaned over the railing, peering into the black water beneath the bridge. There was nothing visible, but I could feel movement, something shifting under the ice, studying me. The whispers multiplied, overlapping like a choir of drowned souls, calling my name and other names I recognized from old news clippings. My chest tightened. I realized then I had crossed an invisible line. They knew I was watching. I stumbled back when something cold brushed against my ankle. Not water, something solid, heavy. And it moved with intention, circling me, always staying just out of sight. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. The whispers grew louder, layering over each other, repeating my fears back to me in my own voice. Names of people I'd known, people I thought were long gone. Each syllable cut sharper than ice. I dropped the recorder. It clattered onto the asphalt, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then a single phrase echoed from beneath the bridge. "Come down, Liam. Come join us." The wind howled, carrying the sound across the frozen river. My flashlight flickered and went out. I fumbled in the darkness, panic clawing at my chest, every instinct screaming to run. But I couldn't tell where the river ended and the ice began. For the first time, I understood what the locals meant when they said you didn't get taken, you chose to step into them. I spent the next few days avoiding the bridge entirely, but the whispers didn't stop. They followed me through the town, in the quiet hum of my apartment, in the static of the television, even in my dreams. Every name they had called out before now twisted into mine, spoken over and over in tones that were both familiar and alien. I returned to Evelyn for advice. She didn't flinch at my description. Instead, she handed me a small notebook, worn and yellowed. "Write down the names they whisper," she instructed. "Every single one. Don't forget a syllable. They need to be acknowledged, or they will find their way inside you." I laughed nervously. The notebook felt absurd. But when I got home, my own handwriting had changed. I wrote without moving my hand, scrawling the names of missing people I had never heard of. My apartment filled with cold. The walls seemed to lean closer. The bridge wasn't done with me. It never would be. And it had learned how patient I could be. A week later, I couldn't ignore the pull any longer. I found myself driving back to the bridge in the dead of night, snow drifting silently around the truck like frozen smoke. Every mile closer made my stomach twist. When I parked at the far end, I noticed movement under the bridge. Shadows shifting across the ice like something alive, something waiting. The hum of whispers rose to a chorus, voices calling every name they knew, every name they wanted me to hear. I stepped onto the bridge, the snow crunching under my boots, and felt the first real touch of cold on my face. Not wind, not snow, but something solid, brushing against my cheek as if testing my fear. The streetlights flickered violently. I realized they weren't just flickering, they were responding. To me, to my presence. And then, beneath the bridge, a shape began to rise from the ice, tall, thin, with limbs that bent in ways human bodies shouldn't. It stopped, waited, watched, and whispered my name. I froze, my heart hammering, unable to move. The whispers grew louder, closer, circling me in the icy air. The shape beneath the bridge stretched upward, impossibly thin, limbs bending in unnatural angles, as if it had learned how the human body worked, step by step. I realized then that it wasn't alone. Hundreds of shadowed forms seemed to ripple beneath the ice, each one whispering names, some of people I knew, some I didn't. The chorus of voices pressed into my mind, a tidal wave of guilt, fear, and memory. Something inside me snapped. I shouted a name, my friend's, someone I loved, and the whispers stopped for a heartbeat. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if acknowledging the defiance. That split second gave me enough courage to turn and sprint back toward my truck, the snow deep and uneven, each step a struggle. As I drove away, the whispers faded into the wind, but I could feel them watching from the bridge, waiting, learning, patient. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been my imagination. But the notebook Evelyn gave me was open on my desk, pages filled with names I had never written. The pen was wet, as though someone, or something, had added them overnight. I never went back to the bridge alone. I avoid driving past it if I can, and I never answer calls after dark. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear faint whispers carried on the frozen Alberta air. Not through the radio, not from the town, beneath the bridge, beneath the ice. They are patient. They are learning. And I know one day, if I make a mistake, if I step too close or forget to acknowledge them, they will finally call me by my full name, and I won't have the choice to ignore it. Blackwood's bridge waits, and beneath it, the whispers are eternal. My name is Sophie Renner, and this happened when I was 24, working as a summer camp counselor at Pine Hollow Lake, Alberta. The town surrounding the lake was small, sleepy, and surrounded by dense pine forests that seemed to close in as soon as the sun went down. It was my first night on the job, and the campers were settled around a roaring bonfire. I sat on the edge, trying to enjoy the quiet, when one of the older kids, Mikhail, pointed toward the lake. "Do you hear it?" he asked. I laughed. "Hear what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the water, pale and frozen, whispering something under his breath. At first, it was subtle, a ripple in the still surface, like a hand brushing against it from below. But as the night deepened, the lake began to move unnaturally. Shadows shifted beneath the water, too quick, too deliberate. The adults dismissed it, but I felt it. The unmistakable sensation that someone, or something, was waiting just beneath the surface, watching. The next night, I volunteered to take the last group of campers back to their cabins alone. The path hugged the lake's edge, where the trees met the water in black silhouettes. Halfway through, I heard soft splashes behind me. At first, I thought it was a stray animal, maybe a deer. But the sounds repeated, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone pacing just out of sight. My flashlight swept across the lake, revealing nothing but still water and dark tree trunks. Then I noticed Mikhail's jacket floating near the shore. It was zipped up, empty. No sign of him anywhere. I ran back to camp to tell the director. The adults laughed nervously, blaming my nerves. They didn't check the lake that night. I didn't sleep. Something was in the water, watching, learning, waiting. And by the end of the week, I realized Pine Hollow Lake wasn't just a body of water. It was a trap. By the third night, I had stopped taking the main trail. Instead, I stuck close to the cabins and avoided the water's edge entirely. But Pine Hollow Lake had other plans. I woke to a faint tapping at my window. Light, irregular, like someone tapping their fingers. My heart leapt. I pulled back the curtains. The moon reflected off the lake, and I thought I saw shapes moving just below the surface. Shadows darted quickly, disappearing before I could focus. I ran outside, the cold night air stinging my lungs, and froze. The ripples formed a pattern, almost like letters, spelling out something I couldn't fully comprehend. Then I heard it, a soft, gurgling whisper, calling names. First Mikhail's, then others from the camp over the years, then my own. I realized the lake wasn't hiding anything. It was showing me. It was keeping track. Each ripple was a tally, each shadow a warning. And I knew that if I got too close, the lake wouldn't let me leave. I tried to warn the campers, but every time I spoke of the lake, the words seemed swallowed by the night air. Even the adults stopped listening after the first strange disappearance. By the fourth day, 2 more kids had vanished. No footprints, no screams, no evidence of struggle, just empty sleeping bags in their cabins. I began taking shifts by myself, sitting near the dock with a lantern, my boots sinking into frozen mud. The water stayed unnaturally still under the moon, but occasionally, small ripples broke the surface, moving against the wind. The sound of soft whispers filled the air. One night, I saw a hand, pale, almost translucent, rise briefly above the water. Not waving, not begging, just rising. And then a head followed. It was Mikhail, but wrong. His eyes were empty, black voids, and his mouth moved silently, whispering my name. I stumbled back, knocking the lantern over. The light flickered and cast shadows across the lake, revealing dozens of pale figures beneath the ice, all staring at me, waiting. By the 5th night, I realized the lake wasn't just dangerous, it was intelligent. Every ripple, every shadow beneath the ice reacted to my presence. I couldn't stay on the dock for long. The air grew heavier with each passing minute, pressing down on my chest like invisible hands. I decided to leave a camera on the shore to capture whatever happened while I slept. When I returned the next morning, the SD card had been removed, the camera lying on its back with the lens shattered. I searched the area carefully and found footprints. Tiny, pale, webbed, disappearing into the water as if the lake itself had swallowed them. That night, I tried to keep my distance, sitting near the tree line instead of the dock. The whispers came anyway, carried on the wind. They were soft, almost tender, calling my name, coaxing me toward the lake. And for the first time, I understood the truth. Pine Hollow Lake, it didn't need to pull you under. It only needed you to approach willingly. The following day, I confronted the camp director. I demanded that everyone evacuate, that the authorities be called. But she brushed me off with a strained laugh, insisting the disappearances were accidents or pranks gone wrong. That night, I watched the lake from a distance, my binoculars pressed to my eyes. Shapes moved beneath the ice like they were rehearsing, circling each other with a slow, deliberate patience. Then I saw something I hadn't expected. A figure stepping onto the dock. It was Mikhail. Alive, but wrong. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being tested for balance. His lips moved, forming words that didn't match any sound. Then he turned toward me, his black eyes wide, unblinking. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt rooted to the frozen ground. The whispers reached a crescendo, surrounding me, echoing off the trees and into my chest. And I knew, in that moment, that the lake had chosen me. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. That night, I approached the dock, my boots crunching in the snow, heart hammering in my chest. The lake seemed to anticipate my steps. Ripples formed before I even touched the edge, circling the dock like hungry fingers. Mikhail stood there, pale and trembling, his lips moving silently. The whispers swirled around me, repeating my name over and over, coaxing, urging, almost gentle. But the moment I stepped closer, the water erupted. Shadows rose from beneath the ice, hundreds of pale figures forming a wall around the dock. I stumbled backward, falling to the ground. The whispers became voices, clear, demanding, pressing into my mind. Come closer, join us. We are waiting. I scrambled to my feet, eyes wide with terror. Every instinct screamed to flee. But the lake's intelligence seemed to mock me, predicting my moves, adapting to my fear. The ice beneath the dock groaned ominously, threatening to give way. I realized the dock wasn't just a platform. It was a boundary, a threshold the lake used to test you. The whispers shifted, twisting my own thoughts against me. I saw faces in the shadows, children, campers, adults, all hollow-eyed, waiting patiently, coaxing me forward with silent insistence. A sudden gust of wind blew snow across the lake, and for a split second, the shadows froze. I could see their forms clearly. Limbs bent unnaturally, faces pale and distorted, expressions of eternal longing. My stomach twisted. I had to get out. I sprinted across the snow toward the tree line. The whispers followed, now layered with faint laughter, almost playful, almost triumphant. I dared not look back, but a part of me knew Mikhail's figure was watching, tilting his head as if studying me. By the time I reached the camp road, my lungs burned and my heart felt hollow. The lake waited, always waiting. And I had learned the first rule of Pine Hollow. It doesn't grab you, it convinces you to come closer. I spent the following days avoiding the lake entirely, staying indoors and keeping my distance from the water. But the lake didn't forget. Every night, I heard faint gurgles outside my cabin, soft splashes that carried the unmistakable rhythm of someone walking just beneath the ice. I began seeing shapes in the corners of my vision, pale forms that vanished when I looked directly. One night, I dared to peek through the window. The lake's surface was unnaturally smooth, but shadows moved beneath it, circling like predators. Then I saw him. Mikhail, standing on the shore, motionless, black eyes fixed on me. I felt his gaze reach into my mind, dragging memories, fears, and regrets to the surface. I knew then that Pine Hollow Lake didn't need to act immediately. It had patience. It learned how to manipulate, to wear you down slowly, making you approach willingly. Every whisper, every ripple was an invitation, and every invitation carried the promise of never returning. The final night, I decided to confront the lake. I approached the dock slowly, heart hammering, hands shaking. The whispers rose immediately, layered with hundreds of voices, some familiar, some unrecognizable, all urging me to step closer. The ice beneath me groaned, sending sharp vibrations through my boots. Shadows moved beneath the surface, rising, bending, curling toward the dock. Mikhail stepped onto the frozen platform, his mouth moving, forming silent words that the whispers echoed. My limbs felt heavy, as if the lake itself had wrapped its fingers around my body. I ran. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the tree line, the whispers had faded, leaving a hollow, oppressive silence that followed me back to town. I never returned to Pine Hollow Lake. The locals say it claims another victim almost every summer. I know the truth. The lake doesn't take you. It teaches you to give yourself. And some nights, when the wind is just right, I hear my name carried on its frozen surface. My name is Ethan Calder, and this happened when I was 28, working as a night security guard at the abandoned Hawthorne Mill on the outskirts of Alberta's small town of Hawthorne. The mill had been closed for decades, roofs caved in, machinery rusting, walls covered in decades of graffiti. Locals avoided it entirely, claiming strange noises echoed from within, even when no one was around. On my first night, I thought the stories were exaggerations. The town had a habit of creating legends to scare outsiders. I parked at the guard shack and began my rounds, flashlight cutting through the thick darkness of the broken interior. At first, everything seemed normal. Loose boards creaked, Rats scurried, the wind whistled through broken windows. Then I heard it. A soft, shuffling sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor above me. I called out, but my voice felt swallowed by the shadows. And then a whisper answered, clear, deliberate, chilling. "Ethan." I froze, gripping my flashlight tighter. The whisper came again, closer this time, echoing from the mezzanine above the main hall. My logical mind fought panic, insisting it was just wind or an animal. But the sound had cadence, intent. It knew my name. I slowly climbed the metal stairs, each step creaking under my weight. Shadows danced on the walls, elongated and twisted by my flashlight, but there was no one there. The sound led me to an office at the far end of the upper floor. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the room was empty, except for a chair that slowly turned to face me, moving as though pushed by an invisible hand. The whisper came from inside the empty office now. "You shouldn't have come." A cold breeze swept through, carrying the faint scent of rust, decay, and something else. Something alive. And I realized, for the first time, that the mill didn't just hold shadows. It was full of them. I backed out of the office slowly, trying to keep calm. But every step echoed unnaturally loud, as if the mill itself was amplifying my fear. The whisper followed me, now layered, multiple voices overlapping in a sinister chorus, each repeating my name and mocking my attempts to remain rational. I reached the main hall, where the old machinery loomed like giant skeletal beasts. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting in ways that defied physics, converging toward the center of the room. My flashlight flickered, casting frantic, jittering patterns. I tried calling the control room, but my radio emitted only static, punctuated by faint, distorted laughter. Then I saw it. A figure, entirely black, humanoid but impossibly tall, standing on the catwalk above me. It didn't move immediately. It simply observed. I felt the weight of 100 unseen eyes pressing down from the ceiling, from the walls, from the shadows themselves. The mill wasn't abandoned. It had simply been waiting for someone to arrive. And I had arrived. I ran for the stairs leading down. But the shadows shifted instantly, blocking my path with dark, undulating forms that seemed to flow across the floor. The whispers grew louder, repeating phrases I didn't understand, some familiar, some horrifyingly alien. My chest tightened as if invisible hands were squeezing my lungs. I ducked behind a conveyor belt, heart racing, and tried to think. I needed a plan, a way out. But the shadows had begun moving independently, sliding across the metal floor toward me with a speed and intent that no human could match. Then the whispers changed tone. They were no longer mocking. They were commanding. "Stay. Join us." My flashlight flickered again, and for a moment, I glimpsed dozens of faces in the shadows, pale, hollow, twisted in silent screams. I realized then that the mill didn't just hide shadows. It created them, feeding off fear, growing stronger with every terrified step I took. I forced myself to keep moving, my boots slipping on the icy metal stairs. Every step creaked like a warning bell. The shadows followed, stretching, twisting, flowing down the stairwell toward me, their whispers becoming a deafening roar in my mind. I felt my own thoughts being pulled, twisted, invaded by suggestions I couldn't fight. Reaching the ground floor, I stumbled into the boiler room, hoping the cramped space might give me some advantage. Steam hissed from broken pipes, making the air thick and heavy. My flashlight caught glimpses of figures in the corners, too tall, too dark, bending impossibly to watch me. I realized the mill itself was alive, its walls and floors conduits for these shadows. Then I heard a voice behind me, clear and human. "Ethan." I turned slowly. No one was there, yet the sound had direction, coming from the very wall itself. My heart leapt. The mill didn't just trap you. It knew you personally. I tried to flee through the hallways, but the shadows multiplied. Each doorway, each opening, became a tunnel of writhing darkness, following me relentlessly. The whispers were no longer just voices. They were memories, fears, regrets, all mine, amplified and projected at me from every corner. I stumbled into the mill's storage room, metal crates stacked high, offering a false sense of safety. I pressed myself against the cold wall, breathing hard, listening. A shadow slithered along the ceiling above me, then dropped down silently, inches from my face. I could feel its presence in my bones. Then I heard scratching from the floorboards beneath me. Slowly, deliberately, the boards began to shift, revealing a dark pit opening beneath. The shadows pooled toward it, moving like liquid, whispering in unison. "Come down, join us." I realized then the mill had a hunger. It didn't just scare you, it wanted you inside, beneath its floor, part of its eternal darkness. The shadows weren't just following anymore. They were surrounding me, pressing in from every direction. The hallways of the mill felt endless, stretching unnaturally, as if the building itself had grown around me. I could hear the whispers forming words I couldn't understand. But the tone was unmistakable. Patient, hungry, mocking. I sprinted toward the main hall, hoping to find an exit through the broken doors, but every path twisted before me. Doors and windows rearranging, as if the mill was alive. A labyrinth designed to trap. My flashlight flickered, and I caught glimpses of faces in the walls, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths moving silently, mouths that weren't mouths, whispering my failures, my fears, my regrets. I stumbled onto the main floor, where the machinery groaned and rattled unnaturally. Shadows moved within the gears, bending around them like liquid. I realized with terror that the mill wasn't just haunted, it was feeding, growing stronger with my fear, using it to shape its forms and tighten its grip. I reached the center of the hall and tried to call out for help, but no sound escaped my lips. The shadows pressed closer, forming almost solid walls around me, their whispers now a deafening chorus of commands. "Come down, stay with us, belong to us." Then I saw the trap door I had noticed earlier, opening wider than before, revealing a dark pit that seemed to lead into the heart of the mill itself. The shadows pooled toward it like water, beckoning, curling around my legs, tugging at me with invisible hands. Panic surged. I kicked and screamed, fighting the pull, but the mill seemed to resist my escape. I realized then that it didn't just want fear, it wanted obedience, a willing victim to become part of its eternal darkness. With a final burst of strength, I leapt past the shadows, sprinting toward the broken exit doors. The whispers followed, fading slowly as I crossed the threshold, leaving me gasping in the cold night air. I collapsed outside the mill, my lungs burning, snow crunching beneath me. The cold night air was a relief, but it didn't bring peace. From inside, the mill seemed to hum with life, a low, vibrating tone that resonated in my chest. The whispers continued, faint now but persistent, curling around the broken windows and drifting into the night. I glanced back at the dark silhouette of the mill. Shadows moved behind the shattered glass, gathering, stretching toward the cracks in the walls as if sensing my retreat. I realized then that escaping didn't free you. The mill remembered. It held on to fear like a living entity. It had taken something from me, something I couldn't name, leaving only the echo of dread in its place. Every night since, I've heard whispers in my apartment, fleeting shadows in corners of my vision, and I know one thing: the Hawthorne Mill doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. And it is patient, waiting for the next visitor foolish enough to enter. I never returned to the mill during the day or night. Locals warned me that anyone who spent more than a single night inside never left unchanged. The mill doesn't just scare, it marks, infects, and follows. I thought moving towns would help, but shadows linger in my peripheral vision. Whispers echo through my dreams, and the chill of that place clings to my skin. I know the Hawthorne Mill waits for others. It doesn't need to attack directly. It manipulates, lures, and cultivates fear until its prey willingly steps into its grasp. And every night, I feel its presence in my apartment, a dark weight pressing against the walls, the floor, and my mind. Some nights, I hear a single whisper, my name, soft, deliberate, patient. I know what it means. The mill is not finished with me, and one day, it will come for me again. My name is Clara Mitchell, and this happened when I was 19, spending the summer helping my grandparents on Willow Creek Farm, a remote property in Alberta. The farm had been in our family for generations, but over the years, stories of strange occurrences had accumulated. Cattle disappearing, doors slamming by themselves, and cold spots in the middle of the fields. I never believed them, until that summer. The first night, I was walking back from the barn with a lantern when I heard footsteps behind me in the tall wheat fields. I turned sharply, expecting my cousin, but no one was there. The air grew thick, heavy, and I felt an unnatural chill crawl up my spine. Then I heard a whisper carried on the wind. Clara. My heart leapt, but I convinced myself it was the wind twisting through the stalks. Yet the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, always matching my pace, always just out of sight. By the second night, the haunting escalated. I was in the farmhouse kitchen, preparing food for my grandparents, when the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The windows rattled and the lights flickered. I ran to check the barn, fearing something had gotten inside. But everything seemed normal. Then I saw it. Footprints in the hay, leading from the barn toward the creek at the far edge of the property. The prints were small, uneven, and pale, almost glowing in the moonlight. I followed them cautiously, my lantern shaking in my grip. The creek was calm, reflecting the stars above. Yet something felt wrong. The air was colder here, and I heard a soft, wet sound behind me, like breathing, close and deliberate. I spun around. The footprints continued, but no one was there. The whisper came again, clear this time. Clara, come to us. A chill ran through me. Willow Creek Farm wasn't just haunted, it was alive. The third night, I decided to stay in the barn, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was haunting the farm. The wooden walls creaked and groaned as the wind howled through the gaps. But that was normal, or so I thought. Around midnight, I heard a soft scraping noise coming from the far corner where the old well stood. I shone my lantern toward it and froze. Shadows moved unnaturally around the well, stretching and twisting as if they were alive. Then I saw them. Figures, small and pale, with hollow eyes, rising silently from the darkness. They didn't walk. They glided, their movements fluid and impossible. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. The whispers began again, not just my name this time, but phrases I didn't understand, soft and urgent, carried by the wind. I realized the farm had been trying to reach me, communicating in a language of shadows. pulling me into its history of fear. I ran to the farmhouse, hoping the lights and the presence of my grandparents would offer protection. But the house felt different that night. Doors that had always opened easily now resisted, rattling as if something unseen pressed against them. Windows showed shapes moving outside, pale forms blending with the tall wheat in the moonlight. I called for my grandparents, but my voice echoed strangely, distorted, swallowed by the shadows. The whispers grew louder, almost mocking me. "Clara, come to us. Stay with us." My knees shook as the air grew colder, frost forming on the edges of the windows. Then I saw a figure at the edge of the field, a small, pale child, standing motionless, eyes hollow, beckoning. I realized it was one of the spirits that had haunted the farm for decades, the ones the townspeople whispered about but never named. And it was waiting for me to join them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the farmhouse seemed alive, stretching and twisting along the walls. I felt watched constantly, even when sitting quietly in the kitchen. The whispers were relentless, overlapping in layers, repeating my name and urging me toward the wheat fields. Unable to resist, I grabbed a lantern and stepped outside. The wind howled through the fields, bending the tall stalks like ocean waves. The pale figure I had seen earlier appeared again, standing silently among the wheat. I noticed more shadows emerging behind it, pale faces pressed against the stalks, watching, waiting. I walked toward them, lantern held high, trying to maintain my courage. Each step felt heavier, as if invisible hands were pulling me toward the creek at the far edge of the property. The whispers changed. No longer friendly, no longer patient. They were commanding. "Join us. Stay forever." I froze, realizing the farm didn't just haunt, it manipulated, luring its victims willingly into its shadows. I stumbled backward, terrified. But the shadows moved faster, cutting off every path back to the farmhouse. The pale child extended a hand, and the others mimicked it in unison, beckoning me forward. Their faces were hollow, yet eerily familiar, like distorted memories of townspeople who had vanished over the years. I turned and ran blindly through the fields, the lantern flickering violently, casting long, twisted shadows behind me. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony that made my head pound. I tripped over the uneven earth, falling face first into the cold dirt. When I looked up, the creek was right before me. The pale figures were waiting, standing along the edge, unmoving yet alive, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The wind carried the faintest laughter, soft but triumphant, as if the farm itself was amused by my struggle. I realized then that the Willow Creek farm didn't just haunt you. It claimed you slowly, bending your will until you followed its shadows willingly. The shadows began to move with purpose, advancing from the edge of the creek toward me. Each step I took seemed mirrored by the pale figures, closing in from all sides. The whispers intensified, no longer soft or inviting. They were urgent, demanding. "Step closer. Stay with us. Belong to us." I ran, stumbling through the wheat that bent unnaturally, almost alive, tangling around my legs, slowing me down. The lantern flickered violently, throwing my own shadow into grotesque shapes across the field. The child from before floated toward me, silent, its hollow eyes boring into mine. Behind it, dozens of others emerged, their pale forms gliding above the earth, leaving no footprints, moving impossibly fast. I felt the pull of the creek, as though invisible hands were dragging me forward. The air was thick with frost and fear, the wind carrying faint, distorted laughter. I realized the farm had been shaping this moment for decades, training each visitor to surrender, and now it wanted me to step into its heart of darkness. The creek shimmered under the moonlight, deceptively calm, yet radiating a malevolent energy. I could see shadows pooling on its surface, shapes twisting like liquid, beckoning me closer. My chest tightened as the figure's whispers layered into a deafening chorus, pushing my mind toward surrender. I tried to resist, screaming, kicking, but my strength faltered under the oppressive presence. The pale child stepped closer, reaching out a small, skeletal hand. Its eyes were empty, yet filled with intent, hungry, patient, waiting for me to cross the invisible line. In a moment of clarity, I realized the farm didn't need to attack directly. It had learned the art of temptation, patience, and manipulation. The shadows could wait, could lure, could shape the mind until the victim walked willingly into their grasp. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the edge of the creek, and finally tore my gaze away, sprinting back toward the farmhouse. The whispers didn't stop. They faded only slightly, promising that this was far from over. I reached the farmhouse, my heart hammering, legs trembling from exhaustion and fear. The safety of walls and doors felt fragile, as though the farm itself could reach through the wood and glass to pull me back. Inside, the house was unnervingly quiet, yet the whispers persisted, faint and sinister, curling around the corners of every room. I could feel the shadow's presence, lingering just beyond the walls, waiting. I realized they weren't bound to the fields or creek. They had followed me here, carried by the very air of the farm. My grandparents slept peacefully, unaware of the horrors outside and the ones now silently pressing against the house. I collapsed in the kitchen, gasping, unable to shake the sensation that the shadows were watching me even now. Waiting for the moment I dared leave the house again. Willow Creek Farm didn't just haunt. It claimed attention, manipulated minds, and lingered. A sentient force thriving on fear and obedience. That summer ended, and I left Willow Creek Farm behind. But its influence stayed. Even miles away, I could feel the farm in my mind, the whispers echoing in dreams, shadows flickering in my peripheral vision. The pale child and the figures by the creek were no longer confined to memory. They were part of me now, reminders of the farm's relentless patience. I've learned the hard way that Willow Creek Farm doesn't need to chase you. It waits, it lures, it cultivates fear until you're ready to follow willingly. And even when I escaped, I knew it would continue to wait for the next visitor, feeding on the unsuspecting, patient, relentless. Some nights, I hear the faintest whisper, my name. Soft, deliberate, impossible to ignore. I know one truth. Willow Creek Farm will never truly let go. And one day, it will call again. My name is Lucas Harper, and this happened when I was 25, traveling through Alberta for a photography project. I booked a night at the Blackwood Inn, an old lodge on the outskirts of a tiny town. Locals spoke little about it, but there were whispers of guests disappearing, rooms locking themselves, and strange, untraceable noises in the halls. I thought it was exaggeration until I arrived. The inn was massive, with creaking wooden floors, dim hallways, and a faint smell of mildew and decay. My room was on the top floor, at the very end of a corridor that seemed to stretch further than the building should allow. As soon as I unpacked, I felt it. A chill in the air, like the building itself was breathing. Around midnight, I heard soft knocking from the adjacent room. When I knocked back, silence answered, followed by a whisper. "Lucas, join us." I froze, heart pounding, convinced someone was playing a prank. But the hotel was empty, and my room door locked from the inside. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was my imagination, the long drive, and the isolation getting to me. But the inn had other plans. The next night, I explored the common room, a once grand space with dusty furniture and a fireplace that hadn't been used in years. The air was thick, heavy, and still, except for a faint rustling behind the chairs. Turning, I saw shadows moving unnaturally along the walls, forming shapes that were almost human. Whispers echoed softly in my ears, repeating names I didn't know. Guests, perhaps, who had stayed here and never left. The temperature dropped sharply, and my breath hung in the air like fog. Then a voice, closer this time, hissed, "You cannot leave." I spun around, but the hall was empty. My flashlight flickered, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move independently. The Blackwood Inn wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had been waiting for me. By the third night, I refused to stay in my room. I wandered the hallways, trying to understand what was happening. The inn seemed endless, corridors twisting in ways that made no architectural sense. Doors that hadn't been there the night before now lined the halls, some slightly ajar, revealing rooms swallowed in darkness. From one room, I heard muffled whispers, soft cries, and faint thumps. Curiosity overpowered my fear, and I stepped inside. The air was icy, and the walls seemed to pulse subtly, like they were breathing. Then I saw the shadows. Figures of former guests, pale and blurred, trapped in a loop of movement, staring, reaching toward the walls, as if trying to escape, but never succeeding. A cold voice whispered behind me, "They belong to us. Now, so will you." I turned. Nothing. Yet I felt the weight of dozens of eyes boring into my back. I realized I was no longer exploring the inn. It was exploring me. I backed out into the hallway, heart hammering. Every corridor now seemed alive. The floors groaned underfoot, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. From the end of the hall, a door slammed violently, then slowly creaked open on its own. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, layering into a chorus of soft commands. "Stay. Never leave. Join us." I ran, following the signs of human presence, the faint glow of an old chandelier, dusty chairs overturned. But nothing remained solid. The inn seemed to shift as I moved, hallways elongating, rooms appearing and disappearing. I could hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned, the hall was empty. Then I saw a faint figure at the far end, pale, humanoid, motionless, staring. It beckoned. I understood then that the inn didn't just trap its guests physically. It manipulated them, isolating, disorienting, bending reality until escape seemed impossible. I realized that the vanished guests were never missing. They were inside the inn, forever. By the fifth night, exhaustion and fear had begun to blur my sense of time. I decided to confront the source of the inn's terror. I followed the whispers to the basement, a place that had been locked on the previous nights. The old key on the front desk seemed to hum in my hand, guiding me, almost urging me to descend. The basement was cavernous, with low ceilings and stone walls slick with moisture. Shadows clung to the corners, pooling like liquid, shifting with impossible fluidity. Faint outlines of former guests appeared along the walls, some standing upright, others crawling as if trying to escape an invisible trap. Each figure had hollow eyes, staring straight into mine. The whispers were deafening now, pressing into my mind, commanding me to join them. A realization hit me like a physical blow. The inn didn't need to chase me. It had been collecting its guests slowly, feeding on their fear, bending reality until escape became impossible. I understood then that the basement was the heart of its power. I stepped cautiously into the basement, my lantern trembling in my hand. The air was thick and cold, carrying a faint metallic scent. Shadows shifted around me, coalescing into faintly human forms, their movements slow but deliberate. They whispered in unison, "Stay, belong, never leave." The words reverberated in my skull, a psychological grip that made my limbs feel heavy. I tried to retreat, but the staircase seemed farther away than before, the basement elongating, twisting like a living thing. Figures floated closer, pale hands reaching toward me, faces blurred yet filled with longing and menace. I realized then that the inn didn't just trap its guests. It absorbed them, merging their essence with the building, bending them into shadows of their former selves. I took a desperate leap toward the stairs, almost losing balance as the figures lunged and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. The basement was alive, sentient, and it wanted me as much as it had wanted every guest before. By the seventh night, I no longer trusted the corridors of the Blackwood Inn. Every hallway I walked seemed to shift beneath my feet, doors appearing where none had been, and the whispers growing louder with each step. The air felt thick, almost solid, pressing against my chest as though the inn itself was aware of my movements. I returned to the basement, hoping to confront whatever force resided there. But the space had changed. The walls stretched outward, the shadows moving fluidly, converging toward the center of the room where a pale, human-shaped figure hovered above the damp floor. The whispers were no longer soft. They were chanting, calling my name in a rhythm that made my head spin. The figure extended a hand, beckoning, and the shadows behind it shifted closer. I felt the tug in my chest, a gravitational pull toward the center of the basement. The inn's power was absolute. It didn't need to physically attack. It could bend perception, distort reality, and draw victims willingly into its grasp. I backed away, heart hammering. But the shadows responded instantly, closing the distance, cutting off every escape route. The chanting intensified, now a deafening wave that seemed to echo inside my skull. The pale figure floated closer, its hands still outstretched, eyes hollow yet compelling. "Join us. Belong. Stay." I realized that the inn didn't just trap guests, it reshaped them. Each lost soul had become part of the building, a shadow, a whisper, a memory turned alive. And now it wanted me. My lungs burned as I scrambled toward the stairs, ignoring the cold hands brushing against my arms, the whispers clawing at my mind. Finally, I reached the top step and vaulted out of the basement. The chanting faded slightly, but I could feel the building's presence pressing against me, patient, waiting. I understood then that the Blackwood Inn was not bound by walls or doors. It existed to ensnare, to manipulate, and to consume those who dared enter. By the ninth night, I knew I couldn't stay in the Blackwood Inn any longer, yet leaving felt impossible. Every hallway now seemed alive, the walls breathing, doors appearing and vanishing at will. Even the air felt heavier, pressing down like water. The whispers followed me relentlessly, repeating names I didn't know, overlapping with my own. Lucas. Stay. Belong. I tried to pack my belongings, but my hands trembled uncontrollably. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch toward me, curling around my luggage, tugging at my mind. The ghostly figures of former guests flickered in and out of the hallways, frozen mid-step, their hollow eyes watching, waiting for me to falter. In desperation, I ran toward the exit. The front doors loomed ahead, but when I reached them, the shadows pressed against me, a solid, suffocating weight. I pushed with all my strength, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I might escape. The inn, however, was patient. and I realized the chase was far from over. Finally, I burst through the front doors into the cold night air. The inn stood silently behind me, its windows dark, but I could feel it. Watching, waiting. I ran without looking back, the whispers fading but never gone, lingering at the edges of my mind like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Even now, years later, I can feel the Blackwood Inn's presence in quiet moments. Shadows flicker unexpectedly. Hallways in other buildings seem longer than they should, and whispers echo faintly in my dreams. I know it waits, patient and timeless, for the next guest, bending reality, feeding on fear, consuming souls one by one. The vanished guests were never truly gone. They were part of the inn now, a warning and a lure. And I know this. The Blackwood Inn does not forgive. It does not forget. And it will call again, patiently waiting for the next curious traveler. My name is Ethan Riley, and this happened during a late-night drive through rural Alberta. I was returning home from a photography assignment when I took the long, empty stretch of Highway 41. The road was dark, flanked by dense forests, and the only sounds were the hum of my tires and the occasional wind through the trees. Locals had warned me about strange sightings on this highway, but I laughed it off until that night. About halfway through, I saw a figure standing by the roadside, motionless, illuminated faintly by my headlights. At first, I assumed it was a hitchhiker, but something felt off. The figure's clothes were old-fashioned, torn and soaked, and its posture was stiff, unnatural. I slowed and rolled the window down. A cold breeze rushed in, carrying a faint scent of wet earth and decay. The figure stepped closer, eyes hollow, voice barely audible. "Please, take me home." My heart sank, and I realized that this was no ordinary traveler. I hesitated but felt compelled to stop. Something about the figure drew me in, though fear coiled tightly in my chest. I unlocked the passenger door, and the figure climbed in without a word. It smelled faintly of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. I tried to start a conversation, asking where it needed to go, but the figure only stared straight ahead, unmoving, its hollow eyes reflecting my dashboard light. The temperature in the car dropped sharply, my breath forming mist, and a low whispers echoed through the cabin. "Hurry, before it finds me." The road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a fleeting moment, the figure's face contorted, mouth opening impossibly wide in a silent scream. My heart raced, and I realized that I had picked up something far more dangerous than a lost traveler. Highway 41 had claimed souls before, and I feared I was about to become one of them. The highway seemed endless, the trees closing in on either side like towering sentinels. The figure in the passenger seat remained silent, but I felt its presence pressing on me, heavy and unyielding. Every curve of the road felt sharper, every shadow deeper, and I began to notice fleeting shapes moving in the woods. Pale, indistinct figures that vanished the moment I blinked. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself I was exhausted and imagining things. But then the figure spoke again, barely above a whisper. "They're coming. You must hurry." Its voice was chilling, hollow, impossible to ignore. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the darkness. I instinctively slowed, but the lights didn't belong to another car. They seemed to hover, moving unnaturally fast, too high to be normal. My passenger shifted slightly, its hollow eyes locking onto the shadows in the woods. And I realized that whatever I had picked up was being pursued by something far older, far more malevolent than than I could comprehend. Panic surged through me as I pushed the accelerator, the car humming over wet asphalt. The figure didn't resist, but leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the forest edges, trembling. Whispers filled my ears now, faint at first, but growing, overlapping in a chorus of urgent voices. "Don't stop. Don't let them catch us." I glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. Shadows flitted behind us, moving in ways that defied physics. Trees bent and twisted unnaturally, and I could swear I saw pale faces pressed against the trunks, watching us, waiting. The air inside the car grew colder with each passing second, and my breath came in ragged clouds. Suddenly, a hand, cold, almost skeletal, brushed my arm. My heart stopped. The figure in the passenger seat whispered softly, "They want me back." I realized then that the phantom hitchhiker was not merely lost. It was hunted, and by giving it a ride, I had become part of the hunt. The shadows in the forest seemed to grow with every passing second. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. But the phantom hitchhiker remained unnervingly still, its hollow eyes fixed on the darkness outside. The whispers grew louder, now joined by faint, distant cries that made my chest tighten. Suddenly, the trees parted for a stretch of open road, and I saw them clearly. Pale, distorted figures gliding above the asphalt, moving impossibly fast, almost hovering. They were humanoid, but elongated, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles, eyes gleaming faintly in the dark. My passenger shivered and whispered, "They can't catch us." Yet. I pressed harder on the accelerator, but the figures kept pace, shadows stretching toward the car as though the night itself was alive. Every instinct screamed at me to abandon the vehicle. Yet the phantom seemed to trust me, leaning closer, urging me to keep going. It was then I realized Highway 41 wasn't just a road. It was a hunting ground, and we were the prey. The road narrowed as I entered a long stretch lined with dense forest, and the pursuing shadows seemed to multiply. Their movements were impossible, flickering in and out of existence, sometimes appearing inches from the hood, then vanishing. I could hear the soft tapping of claws against asphalt, though no figure touched the road. The phantom whispered again, this time urgently, "They remember me. If they touch me, they will take you too." Its voice was filled with a strange sadness, almost human, and I realized that it had been trapped here for years, perhaps decades, forever hunted along this stretch of highway. Fear and adrenaline pushed me forward. I swerved to avoid fallen branches and potholes, the road twisting as if it were alive. Shadows pressed from both sides now, trying to merge with the car, their whispers layering into a deafening chorus of hunger and intent. The night had become a living nightmare, and I understood that there might be no escape until dawn. Or even then. The night stretched endlessly, the highway bending unnaturally, shadows flickering across the asphalt like liquid. The figures behind us were relentless, gliding closer with every heartbeat. The phantom hitchhiker's whispers had turned urgent. "Hold steady. Don't look back. They remember me." Its hollow eyes darted to the rearview mirror, tracking shapes I could barely comprehend. Panic clawed at me, but I knew that if I hesitated, we would both be lost. The shadows stretched and elongated, some merging with the trees, their pale faces pressed against bark, eyes glinting with hunger. Each blink of the headlights revealed bodies that defied physics, limbs twisted and moving at impossible angles, yet entirely alive, entirely sentient. I gritted my teeth and pushed the car harder, weaving through the darkened forest. The phantom leaned forward, silent now, guiding me with an unspoken urgency. Highway 41 was no ordinary road. It was a corridor between worlds, a hunting ground for the lost, and I was now caught in the relentless balance between predator and prey. The shadows weren't just chasing. They were manipulating the road itself. Every curve seemed sharper, every tree closer, as if the highway had become a labyrinth designed to trap us. The wind carried whispers, both from the hitchhiker and the creatures outside, layering into a maddening chorus. Return. Belong. Lost forever. The Phantom shivered slightly, gripping the dashboard, and for a moment, its hollow eyes filled with what I can only describe as desperation. I realized that it wasn't malevolent. It was as terrified as I was. Hunted endlessly along this cursed highway, a ghost condemned to eternity. Suddenly, one of the shadows lunged closer, its elongated hand reaching toward the car. The vehicle jolted as though struck, tires skidding on wet asphalt. I slammed my hands on the wheel, heart hammering, praying the car would hold. Highway 41 was alive, patient, and merciless. And the night was far from over. Exhaustion clawed at me as the shadows closed in. Every blink of the headlights revealed more figures emerging from the forest, their forms unnaturally tall and twisted, faces pale and expressionless. I could hear the whispering chorus now inside the car, pressing against my mind, a mixture of fear, longing, and malice. Return. Belong. Never leave. The Phantom hitchhiker leaned slightly toward me, voice barely audible over the chaos. We're almost past them. Don't falter. Its hollow eyes reflected the shadows that flickered along the sides of the highway. I realized then that it was guiding me, relying on me to survive, as if our fates were intertwined. The road ahead stretched into darkness, but faint moonlight illuminated an old overpass, a landmark the hitchhiker mentioned earlier. I gritted my teeth, pressing the accelerator harder, heart pounding. The shadows surged forward like waves of smoke, but something in the Phantom's presence calmed the terror just enough for me to keep control of the car. Survival depended on reaching the end. Finally, I reached the overpass. A faint glow of dawn just beginning to bleed into the night sky. The shadows recoiled at the light, retreating into the forest, vanishing as if swallowed by the darkness. The whispers faded, leaving only silence and the hum of the engine. The Phantom hitchhiker turned toward me one last time, eyes hollow but calm, and whispered softly, "Thank you. Until next time." Before I could respond, it dissolved into a thin mist, leaving the passenger seat empty. I was shaken, heart racing, but I knew I had survived. Highway 41 was still there, waiting, patient, eternal. The Phantom had escaped for now, but the road had claimed many before me and would claim more. Even now, I hesitate whenever I drive a long, empty stretch of highway at night. I can still feel its presence in my peripheral vision, a warning and a memory that the night is never truly empty. Some roads are better left untraveled. As the night draws to a close, we have journeyed through the darkest corners of Alberta, witnessing horrors that defy logic and chill the soul. From the Blackwood Inn that traps its guests in an endless shadowed labyrinth, to the Phantom hitchhiker on Highway 41 whose haunting gaze lingers in your mind long after the road ends. Each story reminds us that fear can take many forms. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real encounters from ordinary people who found themselves face to face with the inexplicable, the terrifying, and the eternal. Every whisper, shadow, and fleeting figure carries a warning. In the silence of the night, you are never truly alone. Remember, darkness exists not just in forests, basements, or abandoned highways. It lives within the unknown, waiting for curiosity to meet it. Be cautious in your travels, for you never know what might follow. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.